And it's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker and the first formal session of the seminar. Father Laurence Freeman is the Director of the World Community for Christian Meditation, a spiritual successor of John Main, and an international speaker and retreat leader. He's active in interfaith dialogue and has worked with the Dalai Lama and leaders of other faiths, encouraging always the recovery of the contemplative wisdom tradition in the Church and for the benefit of society at large. This morning, he will open our conversation about meditation and mental health by exploring how the soul's health was understood in the desert monastic tradition of early Christianity. Would you please welcome Father Laurence.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning. The 14th century mystical classic, The Cloud of Unknowing, has a section where it remarks on the benefits of the work of meditation on the whole person. And the author says that meditation has a beneficial effect on every aspect, temperament, relationships, not least, he says, on the looks of the person. He says, even if you're not very good looking by nature, meditation will make you much more attractive and people will flock to you. So that's why we put in a 20-minute meditation this morning after our session, so we'll be more attractive to each other. The aspiring meditator is also advised to keep in good health, because this will make the work of meditation much more effective and easier. And any one of us who has tried to meditate while you have a cold or a flu will know the wisdom of that. But these two remarks from a medieval text on contemplative prayer strike an interesting chord with contemporary scientific research into meditation, which has, of course, by now solidly established the physical and psychological benefits. In the light of the physical benefits, the Cloud's comment might seem naive. The neurology of meditation research sounds much more complex and sophisticated. But the comment on keeping in good health in order to maintain your meditation practice reveals even more a different set of priorities. Most physicians and psychologists would recommend that you meditate in order to be more healthy. The Cloud is saying, stay healthy so that you can meditate. What more can we get from meditation that both looks and takes us beyond the measurable physical and psychological benefits? In other words, are there spiritual fruits that may be less measurable, but are even more significant for what we mean by health and wholeness and well-being, even for meaning itself? The link between meditation and medicine is an ancient one, explored and understood long before the scientific method. The prefix med suggests care and attention. That's relevant both to the work of the professional healer and of the meditator, who can be seen, in a sense, to be healing himself or herself, or at least collaborating with deep and natural self-balancing processes. In the light of meditation, our understanding of health and wholeness is called into question. For 3,000 years, Chinese medicine has focused on treating the root causes of disease rather than merely its symptoms. It's holistic in the sense that it addresses the lifestyle, the body, the mind, the emotions of the patient. And central to this approach is the idea of ki, the energy that flows through the 12 meridians of the body. Yin, yang, and the 5 elements need to be regulated when illness of body or mind has set in. But ki is more than energy, it is also intelligence. It's conscious. And so rebalancing the patient is only the first stage of restoring us to health. The second and more highly desired state is to achieve a conscious, intelligent harmony within the patient and between her and her environment. So from health to harmony. This distinction between, say, balance and harmony illustrates the difference between the approach of the cloud of unknowing and that of modern science to meditation. There are stages in the process, and we must look beyond what is measurable to see the whole picture, which is the reflection of wholeness itself. The spiritual dimension is part of the meaning of health. I use the word spiritual as something distinct from religious, although not divorced from it. Can we accept and understand this dimension more clearly so that we can make meditation more fully available to people at large who are trying to find healing, balance, and ultimately harmony and wholeness? That's what we are here for the seminar to explore. And by bringing our insights, our experience, our interests in many different fields together, maybe we can make a contribution to this question. I'd like to make my contribution in and through the Christian mystical tradition, particularly that of the desert monks of the 4th and 5th centuries. Their psychological and spiritual wisdom continues to inspire our contemporaries. They were not theologians, in our sense of the word. They were not moralists, in the ordinary sense. They were very down-to-earth, experientially minded people. They were skilled and experienced physicians of the soul, and they understood the meaning of wholeness. Much of what we would call therapy, they called ascesis, Greek word that means training or exercise, or praktike, which we would call practice. These terms referred to the initial work of healing. They're universally relevant because for them all human beings are in some way sick. All human beings are in some way in need of rebalancing, of healing. And at the beginning of modern psychology, Sigmund Freud thought the same. He says if you take a theoretical standpoint and disregard the quantitative relations, you can readily say that we are all sick, or rather neurotic. The first stage of the healing for the desert therapists was praktike, practice, the development of the practice of the virtues. The word praktike was an unusual word for them to use about spiritual life, because the term was usually used for daily work or economic work, going to work, doing your practice. And using it in this way made an important contribution to the idea of spirituality as we've inherited it, because it makes the spiritual work seem something quite ordinary, something quite mundane, something that we can do on a daily basis, and yet also necessary for survival. But it's a special kind of work. It's a work of an unusual intensity and depth. It involves a struggle with the inner demons of the psyche, gaining the strength to resist temptations and backsliding, and the art of subduing the passions, as they call it, which I'll come to in a moment. This term, passion, refers specifically to a disordered or dysfunctional state of mind, similar to what we would call neurosis, or what Freud called neurosis, compulsion, addiction, or a phobia. The desert therapists were intent on getting to the root of these problems, and for them, prayer was the most direct and the most effective way. But by prayer, they meant pure prayer, or ratio pura, or contemplation, what we here would generally call meditation. This was the preeminent way to achieve this healing, which meant a purification of the whole system, a reset of the psyche, fundamental, the operating system, that leads then to sustainable health and what we might call flourishing. When you read the sayings of the Desert Fathers and Mothers, it might sometimes seem as if they felt that you had to be a hermit to do this work. You had to be at least a monk, but more than a monk, you had to be a monk in first class. Whereas monks living in community, they thought, could only fight the demons indirectly. But I think we can reinterpret that today. There's more people than ever in human history, a greater proportion of people as well are meditating. We can read solitude today not only as physical withdrawal into a mountain cave, we can also see solitude as that which is practiced by many of us here on a daily basis. When we take time, say morning and evening, to sit, say for half an hour, in silence and stillness. That is solitude, regardless of your way of life. Many of you will have meditated before you came here this morning. If you didn't, you'll get your morning meditation shortly. So the busy homemaker, the student, the banker, becomes a short-term hermit when they sit in meditation. Their regularity of practice is what constitutes this aspect of the work. It's the regularity of practice that is crucial to its healing effectiveness. Practice is therefore more important than theory, although it is necessary to have a right theory and a good introduction to meditation before you can get into developing beneficial practice. But in terms of what the practice was dealing with, the desert therapists were not concerned so much with actions as with the thoughts, the fantasies, the mental states which provide the clues, the indications, the symptoms of our state of health. They call these states of mind, or thoughts or fantasies, logismoi. Jesus expressed this when he said, "I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So it's what goes on in the mind that was their real concern, rather than moralizing so much about behavior. Confronting these thoughts in the heart, which is the integral center of the human being, involves conflict. It's not going to be easy. It won't be easy, and the nature of the conflict demands a high level of self-awareness to deal with it, and quite a lot of external support structure. 8 principal logismoi, or thoughts, were diagnosed by the desert therapists: gluttony, fornication, avarice, grief, sadness, depression, you might say, anger, apatheia, which is listlessness, laziness, vainglory, and pride. These are the staple elements of all therapy in every culture. We may meet them in the form of eating disorders, sex addiction, narcissism, or depression, but they are the old friends of every therapy program. The first stage of practice is hard work, which is just what we discovered, of course, in the first stages of meditation. The distractions that we battle with are the results of an inner struggle, which at times darkens the mind and seems to make meditation impossible. How often do people say, that we have said, I can't do this, I'm just too distracted, it's just not worth the effort. Desires, multiple levels of sadness, and many passions flood the mind. And so perseverance, patience, a non-judgmental attitude to the practice, these are the Desert Fathers and Mothers' recommendations for getting past this first and important hurdle. They also recommended psalm singing, because this calms the passions, as they said, and brings tranquility to the unruliness of the body. Popularity of Gregorian plain chant today and other forms of sacred music also points to this therapeutic effect of music. Don't give up. That was what they were basically saying to each other and encouraging each other. Or if you do give up, because we all do, then start again as quickly as possible. John Main absorbed this and transmitted this wisdom about practice in his own teaching on meditation, in which he transmitted really the wisdom of the desert to our contemporaries. He saw this as a way of healing that led to ultimate wholeness, that is our destiny.